Hey folks, welcome to SIG-Auth. Today is August 16th, 2023. And today we'll start with our agenda here. Mo, you want to go?
Yeah. So the first item today is basically the document that we've used in the past to track KEPs and stuff. So Rita, Anish, and I, we worked on updating this for what we believe is already in flight for like 129, and then also things that are in like our backlog. So with the intent of trying to see if we can make sure that anything that folks are interested in working on has both someone who's signed up to do that work and someone from the leads list that's signed up to review the KEPs and other things. So you want to go through the list, Rita, I guess? So the first one is CAMSV2. That one is, I think we could GA this release if we finished all the remaining items in the board, which it's linked there. Not too worried about that one. If we don't GA it, that won't be the end of the world. Jordan and Rita, what is our state of authorization config?
I just pinged Bruin on Slack. I think he's going to split his PR out. Hopefully, I asked if he could have it by next week, and then we can get folks to review, and then get the ball rolling for 129. That's the goal. But we'll see. Are there, I guess, anybody else on the call who's interested in this feature? Feel free to comment in the doc as well. Or hang out with us in this Slack channel.
Yeah. Jordan, were you planning on working on this in this release?
Yeah, I'll be working on this.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And let's see, David, I see you're on the call. Are you still interested in the feature in terms of like review and stuff? Did you have cycles for that this release?
I am in a different doc. The structured authorization config.
Yes.
I think my comments were addressed a while back, so I can be, but I'm satisfied with the solution I got.
Okay. Cool.
I guess it's more KEP and code reviews.
Yeah, I think the KEP is fine. It's mostly like the actual code.
Yeah. The KEP is merged. Yeah.
I can help if you want. Yeah.
Between David and I, it might be helpful if one of us pays attention to the authorization one and one of us pays attention to the authentication one.
Sure. And I have no preference about. Well, actually, I do have a small preference for authorization over authentication. You've already claimed dibs, so I guess I will do the authentication one.
I missed my chance to arm wrestle
you. You said authentication, David?
Yeah, since he's already got authorization, I'll take that one.
Cool. Okay.
Got the S on the wrong spot. It's dead's 2K, not dead 2Ks.
I figure the probability is.
I mean, you had a 50-50% chance of getting it right.
I know.
Okay, so then we normally just talked about a structured authentication config. So Anish has one PR out that I've reviewed and approved, and that needs approval on API server changes and like some vendor changes. And then I know Anish, you have like a series of PRs that you're working on, which I've been sort of reviewing with you. So I guess, David, if you're helping me with that, that would be fine too.
Yeah, that one was actually in my review queue, so I'm happy to try to get through the one that was already in my queue. Or if David wants to pick it up, that's fine. But I told Anish I would review it, so I'm happy to.
Okay. Good stuff. All right. So I think for Cluster Trust Bundle, we just did an API review on some of the stuff recently. I don't see to hear on the call. Jordan, do you know if he plans on working on it in the coming release? I told to hear that like Anish and I would help him, but
I think so, but I haven't checked with him. I can take an AI, just ping him on it.
okay. And then see, Standa, you and David are on the call. Are you guys still interested in the undecryptable resources cap?
Oh yeah, I could still work on it. Just I think that I need somebody to approve the cap review things and so on and so on.
I think Jordan, you and David had looked at the cap. Was there any specific things that really needed to be addressed and stuff?
I think most of it was around the API, and I don't
Yep.
really remember where it got left.
I think that most of the parts that were that were avoided or were revolving about, around the API were that was specifically what if I only remember.
So
Yeah.
so yes, I can come back and take another look at that. Well, because I do think that's pretty important for KMS.
Yep. Okay, that would be good to have. So on that one, are we? So I think what I'm hearing though, we will work on it in 129, get the cap merged and implementable, and if things work out, maybe we'll get to write some code. Get that.
Yeah, I think that the code shouldn't be too bad once we agree on what the error should look like.
Okay, then there was the reference grant stuff. I have not spoken with Rob or Nick. I don't actually know where we're at on this stuff at the moment.
I haven't seen much happen with this. Given what else we have for implementation stuff queued up, I don't know that we would have room for this in 129. If they or someone wants to work on the design for this, I think we could probably spend some time on the design, but I don't know that we'll get to implementation.
Rita, do you want to assign that to me? I'll reach out to Rob and Nick and see. Like, even if we don't make progress on the cap by the deadline, it would be nice if in like 129 we maybe had like a plan for something in the future. Let's see, Micah, I see you on the call, but I don't see Nick on the call. Do you guys still want this? I think you guys were the primary askers for the client exec proxy.
Let's put it on hold.
Okay.
For now, until yeah.
Okay. Hey, by the way, is Nick still on leave right now?
He just got back Monday.
Okay, I'm gonna say he's on leave because you can't just show up after being gone for months and just somehow magically function. Okay, Rita, just can you leave a comment on client exec proxy and to just move it out of the release?
Oh, so this one is no, don't need to confirm?
I mean, I'm confirming with Micah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
That is why I asked him.
Okay, so move it out. Wait.
Okay. Let's see. I don't see James on the call. And if we get to it, we can talk about the specifics on the bound SA token improvements since I had the stub PR for it. Jordan and I guess David, what is y'all sense for us being able to maybe get some of the code in for this one? Like, I feel like the cap would be pretty small for this one because I think we're not asking for anything crazy, right? Anybody?
Sorry, I'm trying to juggle screens and see what we're talking about.
Yeah, this is the bound service account token with the chained requester user info.
Right. And I'd spoken to Jordan about it a little while back, and I tried to transcribe what we.
Yeah, I don't
Or-
think I have the background to make a good judgment on that one.
Okay.
So if Jordan does, great.
Let's see. Yeah, I think it's additive and probably small-ish. So it seems likely that we could reach agreement on the design. And I think it's worth trying.
Okay.
And there were two aspects. I would probably address the explicit inclusion of the node information as well. So
Mhm.
this is just generally like what are people missing in service account tokens? You know, the attribution
What do people do with the pod information? They immediately look up the node.
to look up the node. Like that's the thing they do. Can we make their life better?
Yeah.
Our life better. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that's fine. I think we're all in agreement there. I don't think the change is anything dramatic either. So I think that will help. Okay. We can talk about this more in a little bit if we have time. Rita, can we go back to the other doc?
So do
Okay.
we agree this is in for 129?
I think we agreed that we would try to get the KEP in, and if we get the KEP in time, we believe that it's small enough that we could make progress on it.
Yeah. I can give attention to the design, and the code change seems small.
Okay, cool.
And I think Mike was interested as well, so we might be able to get some review time from him as well.
Mike who?
Mike
Oh.
did
Oh, okay,
our Mike.
cool.
Okay, this is one that I haven't spoken to y'all at all about, but it is something I'm quite interested in, which is, and I think this was brought up in the early days of when we were discussing the cluster trust bundle stuff with Tahir, but basically I would like to be able to use the certificates API to have the CSR API from the certificates API group be able to provision credentials for pods, like via the kubelet, kind of like what we do for token request. Are folks interested in that? I don't expect to write any code for this in 129. I just don't think that fits. But I would really like to be able to get a KEP within the cycle, so not by enhancement screens, but just in general.
So by that you mean you want to have a projected volume that will create a private key, create a CSR, wait for it to be signed, grab the certificate, and then mount it into a pod?
Yeah, there's a lot of specifics around the private key stuff, but yeah, nominally yes, right? Like I put some YAML in my pod spec and I get credentials from a particular signer and I just use them, and I don't really care where the signer is or how it came about. It could be a built-in signer, it could be spiffy, it could be whatever.
Okay.
Does that sound interesting to you, David? Could you use that?
I'm trying to decide where the line is for, and this should be a CSI driver.
Yeah, so I the reason I wanted to avoid a CSI driver is because it just adds a lot of machinery onto kubelets, and I wanted to very much be able to run my signer off of the cluster. So basically like co-located with my control plane, and then in the same way that I run controller manager today. I guess AKS runs controller manager today. But yeah, I didn't want to have a bunch of machinery present just to do this kind of stuff. Like I know it's technically possible with a CSI driver. Like I
I
think,
think I think the details of comparison there inside whatever you write up is going to be useful.
Yeah.
Like the pro con is going to be useful, right? Like you think about a lot of the cluster trust bundle stuff,
Mhm.
questions about why can't this be out of tree. The initial part eventually came in because, in part, because of the webhook usage, right?
Mhm.
I can see utility in the thing. It's just a question of why and why this particular way.
Yep, that makes sense. But that does at least sound like you're vaguely interested or have thoughts.
I can see why someone would want to do it. Yeah, I don't have an immediate use case at this moment. I think if I were ordering them and saying like which one gets me more excited, the workload certificate work gets me more excited.
The which work?
Workload certificate from I'm gonna butcher his name, Ahmed.
Oh, to here?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean cluster trust bundle?
Well, he has his doc on workload certificates as well. Here, I'll link it in.
Okay. Workload certificate. I'm trying to remember what this is.
It was a mechanism for projected volume that was going to provide a way to, say this is who I am. It sounds very similar to what you're describing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's exactly what I'm describing.
Well then you have a starting point.
Yeah, I guess I was not going to use a new API. I was going to use the CSR API.
Consider this another one of those alternatives that you would have to like help us explain and choose amongst.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, actually, it literally has a signer name and a service account. It's just a slight abstraction on top of CSR. Okay, that's cool. That's fine though. Cool. I thought Tahir had something like that too. I just forgotten about it.
Okay.
Oh.
It does have some details that say like this is how you can trust it on this pod, sort of thing.
Okay. Cool. All right. We're done with that one for now. Jordan, you were the one that I saw reviewing a PR associated with the next thing. I don't know if we want to.
Yeah, I'm not convinced this is high enough priority. There are some, so the next thing was saying nodes are currently given permission to list watch all pods. They happen to filter down to just pods scheduled to themselves with the field selector. But that's mostly for efficiency reasons. That's not actually enforced. And right now, authorization doesn't have visibility to field selectors, label selectors to be able to enforce that. So someone opened a pull request doing some things to try to enforce that. And I'm saying if we're going to enforce that, we should actually do it by making authorization have visibility to field selector, label selector, and then actually plummet through the authorization information. I see value in having that. It raises a bunch of kind of weird edge cases. I know David has talked about that for other things. I think in reference grant, it came up like having visibility to labels and enforce permissions on label selection in list watch. It's come up a few different times, so there's probably something there, but priority wise, this doesn't seem like something that we would do next. There are other things I think we would work on or try to complete or try to get going next.
Okay, that's fine. Jordan, can you then tell the person that we will not be looking at their KEP in the 129 release cycle. Because they wrote something. I don't know what it says. I didn't read it. But if it's not priority for us, it's not going to go anywhere.
There isn't actually a proposal. There's just a pull request, code pull request open right now. But
Rita, when you opened that issue, did he actually make a KEP doc? Right. There's a proposal right there, right?
no, that's the link to the code PR.
The proposal is the PR. I see what he's doing. Yeah, okay. Well, either way, tell the person not to write a KEP because we won't read it.
Yeah, I'll point to this doc probably. If we want to order, sort of priority order these things, that might be helpful to give a concrete sense of like what the other things we're spending time on in 129.
Okay. Do we want to go back up real fast?
I mean, the stuff that's in progress is pretty clear.
Okay.
Maybe when we're done, we can sort of do a second pass and
Okay.
try to order.
Okay.
Sorry, you're going like going back. Okay. Then we had a KEP that I guess is currently closed, but is still there as a PR for the external signing for service account tokens. I know from last KubeCon, I had an action item to describe splitting trust, which I never did, which I can still do if we care. But yeah, is this a priority for us? Also, I see Micah, you're on the call, and I see Ihor, you're on the call. You all still care before we even ask if there's a priority?
Yes.
Okay, I figured you
Care.
still cared. Okay, now the other question. Does anyone have time? I have opinions, but no time.
I don't have an answer today about time, but I would like there to be time. I will see if I can have time made for someone.
Okay, so they're like maybe. Is it like Jordan, David? Mike's not here. I would ask Mike. Mike is probably the best one in terms of this one. I'm trying to think of who.
I don't have a lot of interest personally.
Yeah. Jordan, do you know if anyone in GKE cares?
Not that I know of. Mike might, but I'm not especially interested, but not especially opposed. Kind of. Yeah, I don't have a lot of cycles to devote to it, but
Okay. All right, cool. And then I think the last three were sort of just things that have been open in some state in terms of like issues and stuff for quite some time. The first one, I know we don't really hear about this in SIG-Auth, but apparently I was talking to Anish, apparently people do ask about this in secret CSI not too infrequently, which I guess kind of makes sense because it's kind of that's what secret CSI is all about, is having volumes with secrets. So I guess the people that care show up there and ask about it. I don't think any of us has, like, I don't know of anyone that's got the time necessarily, but I wanted to bring this up because it is apparently a thing that people still care about. So yeah, I guess that's it. Anybody interested?
I haven't looked at this in a long time. I vaguely remember thinking that anything we do would not be enabled by default because we would have to stay compatible with existing use of mounting secrets. And so like a new interaction or new pattern that requires like opt-in or adoption by everybody in order to be effective is limited right out of the gate in terms of how big of a dent it's going to make in like security posture. If we have other mechanisms for people to get access to secrets, like fetching them from the API, which was mentioned here, for people who are worried about that and don't want these things persistent on disk inside their containers, like there is already a thing they can do to get it from the API and hold it in memory and then clear the memory when they're done using it. Like there are alternate things we can recommend today. I'm not really sure, like a complicated sort of encrypted on disk and then you get the key from somewhere. Like I just have a hard time seeing something like that getting wide adoption. So I'm not sure how much effort it's worth.
Manish, do you have a sense of like what people ask for us? I see, hey, look, I see the link where you probably encryption of mounted contents.
Yeah, I think like the most common scenario is because we do tempfs on Linux, so we do whatever we do with Kubernetes secret mounted as volumes, right? And the question that's often asked is like, hey, is there a way these can be encrypted in the file system? And with the CSI driver approach, like one of the things that we show off is the pod portability rate. Like if you're moving from one cloud provider to another, and if you're just relying on file systems, you don't have to make any code changes. So like you can use Secrets Manager, you can use like Azure Key Vault, and you can just move the application to a different cluster or a different Secrets Manager. So I think a lot of users have been adopting CSI and they want to take advantage of it. And then we get asked this question that, hey, it's all available in plain text. Is there a way we can encrypt it? And whatever we do, it won't be specific for CSI. Like it would just be for every other thing if users have any other way of doing it today.
Aren't sensitive contents, I mean, not always, right? Because you can encrypt them on disk, but aren't they often just controlled with SE Linux? Like you have file permissions in SE Linux, and that's enough for most use cases, right?
My sense for this issue was less about the container being able to read it, but that if the container was compromised, something else was running in that process space, it couldn't just read plain text from any file the container process had access to. Like another step would be required, like getting a key from somewhere in order to decrypt the thing on the file system. But like my question is, however the container needs to get that key from somewhere to make use of this. So however it gets it, by hitting a network endpoint or reading the key from disk, like it's turtles all the way down. Like if you don't want them to get the secret content from the file system, but you have some way for the container process to get the decrypting key, like couldn't the compromise thing just go get the key as well? You can become more and more elaborate. Like you need information from the file system, and then you need to get the key from somewhere else to do the decrypt, or you do it and it's only available at start time, and then it becomes unavailable. So there's like a window where the decrypting key or the secret content is available. It's just hard to know how big of a dent that would make, and you can emulate some of those things already with the mechanics we already have. I think before we spend a lot of time and effort building something in to do those things, we need to be pretty confident that it's going to be worth the effort, that it will actually get adoption and people will actually use it in ways that people who can't use the existing sort of emulation mechanisms.
Okay.
Do you think also maybe because people aren't aware of the alternatives or the extra steps that they could do?
Like as soon as you make the container process have to do something other than read it from a file, like that impacts their application logic, right? They have to integrate with some library or go change their program to go do a thing. And as soon as you do that, like the bar for difficulty of consumption goes up like orders of magnitude. So I just am skeptical that anything that requires changing application logic is going to get much adoption.
Is this a real concern?
I don't, that sentence is less clear. I think there's a lot of context in what they're saying that involves the 50 comments above them. So it's okay. Based on this discussion, Anish, if I could give you an action item, based on what we just talked about, could you maybe make a comment on that issue? Maybe also link that same comment to the secret CSI issue so people notice it, and then just update the needs kept doc with that information or with a link basically. I think the general framing is we would need stronger evidence that it meaningfully raises the bar and it would actually have adoption. Basically, I think what I got from Jordan is that like any implementation would be non-trivial. For both the application consumer and us, the Kubernetes developers. So all that effort has to be worth it in the end.
That's good. Yeah, and then also just for context, right? Like when we had users asking about it, we were trying to come up with a way to do it in the CSI driver. Like we tried a bunch of proposals and POCs, but everything required like application changes, and there was no generic way to do it. Like you had to come up with different ways for different providers. And at that point, it just made more sense for users to go and change their application to use the secrets API instead of doing it from the file system.
Yeah, the only generic mechanism I can think of is once the container is healthy, like unmount the volume or remove the content from the file system. Like assume that it only reads it on startup, and once the thing is running and healthy and ready and like whatever signals they've put on the container, then clear it all. Like that's the only generic thing I can think of. And that mechanism would belong entirely to SIG storage. Like that would be an option probably for config maps and secrets and like
I mean,
all of these
if
things.
you did that and you then compromise the machine, wouldn't the first thing you do be to cause a process panic, have it reinit, and then make it available to yourself again?
Well, I mean, the compromise of the container is probably more the concern, right? And if you compromise a container and then the container gets reinitialized, presumably your compromise isn't persistent between different instances of the container, or it's less likely to be. You know, if I compromise a web server, I get into that process and then I crash it, and another new container starts up.
Well, so like with empty dir and stuff, you can write something that'll get restarted, and then if like you just inject yourself, well, whatever, sure.
Yeah, the generic implementation I can think of
Generic enough, and
it's pretty naive. The concern that I hear in the issue is from people who don't control the application code, but do want to protect against file system exposure. And that intersection seems really weird. Like they don't control the application code, so they can't make it go fetch the API, the secret from an API, but they do want to do things like require decryption of content on disk that require changing the application code. Like that, I don't see how those two things can both work together.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see Tim all clear on the call, but I was going to ask him if he had any interest in working on all the random things that people keep asking about. Like, I want this tiny change in audit logs, which some of which are like good and some of which are not great. This is just one of those, like, there's like many issues kind of like this one. I don't know if we necessarily need to dive into those right now. But yeah, I think this one and like the system colon masters rename have just kind of been hanging out as placeholders, but nobody's said that they were interested. I think those are things that we could theoretically work on if someone was interested. Okay. Do we want to order things? What's the, how do we frame the ordering? I think like for myself, like the highest one is the authentication config stuff. Jordan, would my guess be correct that yours is the authorization one?
Yes. Is KMS not the highest priority for you?
It is not, because it's beta and it
It
basically
is
works.
no longer
I've already
as
deployed
critical.
it. I know Jordan's giving me that look.
That's
No problem.
naughty.
No, it is high priority. I do want it to be done because honestly, I'm sick and tired of thinking and talking about it and just don't want to talk about
There
it.
you go.
Uh-huh. Yeah, your timing on that's awesome, Mo. Told you, Jordan, never gonna finish it.
No, we're gonna finish it mostly because Rita will probably yell at me if we don't.
I'm just going to say reviewers will have a lot more brain space to think about other things once KMS is actually wrapped up in GA.
So what
Yeah.
I'm hearing from Jordan is I can get like an extra Kepin per release if I just stop making him think about crypto crap. Okay, so like 1, 2, 3 there. I think I personally care about cluster trust bundle more than the undecryptable resources, but it might actually be equal in my brain, but something like that.
Well, this one has also been on the backlog for many releases.
Yeah,
Okay.
cluster trust bundle takes the existing like the projected volume aspect makes the existing API that's already merged actually usable for pods. So getting that in alpha so it can progress, like that's part of making the existing work usable. So I think that's probably more important than starting a new thing. That's my perspective.
Okay. So we moved out client exec proxy. I don't know where we stand on reference grant.
Yeah, we're gonna reach out. I don't. I'm skeptical that we'll be able to get implementation going for 129 on this.
I'm skeptical we're even gonna get the KEP and 129 just because I don't even know what's supposed to be in the KEP at the exact moment. We had like a very broad conversation at KubeCon. I guess the next thing would probably be the yeah, those changes. So that's like number 6, I guess.
I'm moving KMS up to implementable since it's the only one that doesn't actually need kept work.
Ah, okay, so now there's okay.
That's a good way of grouping things. Yeah.
Okay. It's also Jordan's way of saying it's got a 1 now.
Yes.
I love it. So this is how we get
If I
it.
can't get the right priority, I just invent a new category and then it's number 1
Hey,
in that.
No, just say that
works.
category is bigger than your category. Okay, that's fine. I'm hearing you loud and clear, Jordan. Do not slack on the KMS work. I'm hearing.
Let's finish some things and get them done. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, technically, technically authorization and authentication configs are also implementable, right? Because the caps
As cluster trust bundle.
they're all in that state.
Yeah.
Okay. But KMS is by far the furthest along.
Yeah, the things where we actually have the design nailed down and what we're on now is like implementation. In my mind, those should be the default top of list things unless something is just clearly more important. But taking the things where we actually figured out what the design should look like and we're done with that, I think we should make progress on or make a conscious decision to say, you know what, we're going to defer implementation. But by default, let's implement the things we already hammered out designs on.
Okay, so the list of that is KMS, Auth-N and Auth-Z. Is there anything else?
Cluster trust bundle.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Now the ranking is all messed up.
I know. I had now.
Jordan, what did you do? Just kidding.
My default secondary ranking is like, what's the current stability level? So KMS being beta, to me, says that should be the priority thing. Like, we should finish beta things before we introduce new alpha things or continue progress on alpha things. So I still think KMS should be top. But
no, that's fine.
That's fine, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just update the thing. So
Okay.
2 is Auth-N, 3 is Auth-Z, 4 is cluster trust bundle.
I'm gonna reorder them so they are
Order,
in that
okay.
numeric order. There you
Looks
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
think I agree with the 1, 2, 3, 4, and I guess, and I think 5, 2.
Let me move 6 up, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Things that we're planning to work on caps for in the 129 timeframe. So undecryptable resources, sounds like we're wanting to make progress on the cap there. The bound token improvements, I think that design is going to be small enough that that's reasonable to pull into 129 and useful enough. Like it's filling a gap in that people have with tokens today. And I think it'll be pretty small.
Yeah.
Anything else?
What's next
Pretty
after
much
that?
it.
Going too fast, read. I can't read.
I just want to make sure we don't have anything else at the bottom. Yeah.
Oh, man, Jordan's being rough. He's just saying flat out, this is not planned for 129.
Plans can change, but you make plans. If you don't plan anything, then yeah.
Oh, we
Okay.
also said we're moving this
Yeah,
out.
so client exec proxy can move out. And I think we're also saying that reference grant can move out.
Yeah.
I guess, Jordan, when you say not planned for 129, does that mean that we won't even within the few months of the cycle like read the KEP? Or is that like
Not necessarily. I think it's best effort, right? Like
Okay.
the things that we're actually wanting to get a design nailed down for 129 are going to get priority. And so as we have bandwidth, I think it's okay to revisit other things, but it's like, if we're choosing between things in the review queue, between stuff that's being implemented or stuff that is in the list for, like, we're going to try to get this nailed down for 129. We're going to prefer the stuff higher up on the list.
Okay. Are we good?
Well, so what's after 5 and 6? Sorry, what's that? So okay, are we saying we won't order anything after 6 because those are everything after number 6 is just best effort anyway? So there isn't a priority. Is that what we're saying?
Unless you hear back from, say, this one, right?
Okay.
Yeah. I think the current state is no, because we haven't heard anything.
Okay. So that's reference grant and client exec proxy. We said we're going to move out. This one is just about making a design. Jordan's going to follow up on that one. Where do we land on external signing? I heard from David and you, Jordan, I guess that it wasn't a high priority for you guys, and the same is true for me. So I'm assuming it's just going to stay there. Better. Oh yeah, and we talked about the other stuff. Okay, I guess that covers the ordering. We still got 10 minutes. If we want to talk some more about the bound SA token stuff. So Jordan, I don't know if you had a chance to read that paragraph. I tried to write down what we spoke about into what I thought you said.
Username, you would requesting user. Oh,
Rita, he was reading it.
no, that's okay. I have my own screen. That's fine. Yeah, so the two main questions I had were about privacy of user info, like human user info, especially, and token size. Pragmatic things like only including the username and UID and not groups, and figuring out what we do if you use a token to request a token to request a token to request a token. Like, do we compress the chain of requesters, or do we only have the first and last in the list, or like figuring out how we keep the token from just growing in size in unbounded ways, while still giving visibility to sort of the original, where did the original token in this chain come from, and what was the most recent requester. So first and last is probably what I would do. It would be good to hear from people in different environments who like what the considerations are for putting human usernames into claims that would then be visible to anyone they presented the token to. I don't know if that presents like PII, personally identifiable information concerns or not. Obviously the API server already has visibility to that because you're making a request to the API server, but then to take that information and put it in a claim that other consumers of the token could see. So that would be something we might like send out to the list, or kind of talk to different providers and ask, like, is this a concern? If we hear that it is, we might consider scoping this just to system users, although that kind of hurts some of the value of this. If a human user requested this, or a non-system user requested this, but we don't know who, like that's a little sketchy. But so those are the two main questions that I had. But yeah.
Okay, so on PII, we could, like, once the KEP is a little further along, maybe paste it in SIG-Auth, 6 security Slack channels, the mailing list, just to kind of see. I mean, there's an entire privacy team at Microsoft. I guess I could ask them if they
Yeah,
have.
I would just ask like all the providers that we know and like have contacts at, like, would this be a problem for you if end user usernames showed up in claims? I think we have pretty good representation. We can reach out to a lot of people, a lot of places.
Micah, do you have any sense if EKS would be concerned for PI from a PII perspective?
I mean, our primary use case is really with is for system identities and for using it against like for credential changes. So with like AWS. So not off the top of my head, but it would be good to survey. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
My gut feeling tells me this is probably a problem. I mean, because we don't have to do this today, right? So why are we doing it now?
Well, I mean, I think my argument would be is that being able to get a credential and then use that credential in a way that basically leaves no trace of yourself from then on is a bug. It is not a feature.
The information is there. Well, the information is not there. Once we put a identifier on the token, the information could be there if you went back to an audit log. But it's certainly inconvenient to correlate. So I think the minimum is putting an identifier on the token instance and making that part of the audit log, so that someone could correlate a particular credential with a particular requester that emitted that credential. So that's the minimum, and there's no PII concern there.
Right, right.
Whether we want to make life easier for people or make it possible for people who don't have access to audit logs, we may, but yeah, we need to understand what we're exposing and what size downsides are.
Yeah, so I think we're saying that like if we had like a first class node ref, and if we scope the identities that were captured to like system colon identities, we don't have any PII concerns there. It's just less useful. But it would still be in the audit log with the once we had the identifier. So basically in all states the audit log is complete as long as you keep all the events. Yeah. I
Do you
guess
have- oh, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, like, if we were concerned, like let's say we get feedback that people are concerned about PII and we scope it down to some set of identities, would we give people the option of not scoping it down? Like we would probably default to the scope down approach then, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, there are possibilities. We could have if it's a non-system one, we could just collapse that to say a non-system user requested this, or we could omit the claim, and for people who wanted to include the username no matter what, we could. I think we'd probably wait until we hear back about whether it's an issue or not to think about what alternatives to chase.
Okay. I think so. The other thing I think, Jordan, you and I spoke about is I think you mentally mapped this in the same way that we have impersonation today, which is that impersonation is a concept that audit fully understands, but basically nothing after the impersonation layer can make any decisions based on the fact that the request was impersonated. And based on that sort of train of thought, I think your desire was to not include any new, you did not want to include any of the original's requester information in the user info that the service account presents to the API, on the basis that people would do bad things, basically in authorization or admission, right? That you are the service account, but the origin of your service account is wrong, and thus I disallow you from doing the thing that you're actually allowed to do.
Yeah. Yes, I think if who requested the credential, who requested the credential is an attribute of the credential. It's not an attribute of the principal identified by the credential. And so translating that into user info, so that I think people would do bad things with it. And it just seems like a layer violation. It's better to omit it for now. And if there's evidence that we should include it, which is the first thing. I don't understand your question.
I was asking a question on Micah's comment. He was like, first is, I was like, which first thing?
Knowing the first requester of the token. So if I get a token and then use that token to get a token and use that token to get a token and use that token to get a token, knowing who got the first token is the one you care about. Is that what you meant?
No, I guess in that respect, I meant last.
The most
Like
recent.
the most recent, yeah.
Wait,
Okay.
but did you have any concerns if the middle sections were missing?
Not really. Like in this case, no. No, not for our use case that we're most concerned about.
Jordan, on the whole impersonation thing, so how would we sort of document our rationalization about the claims are sort of there in the payload, and they do include all the requester information. So if you are an entity like an STS endpoint for a cloud provider, you are allowed to make the judgment call. But we don't believe like admission plugins and authorization plugins are allowed that same judgment call. That's the part I think.
Those things are not deciding whether a credential is valid. Like the authentication layer decides if a credential is valid. Once a credential has been decided to be valid, like another layer sort of undoing that decision and saying like this was a valid credential that identified this service account, but because of who got that credential, I don't think this request is actually authenticated. Like who requested the credential doesn't seem relevant after you've decided the credential is valid to identify that.
How does Gmail decide that I need to re-authenticate to take a particular action?
So I don't know the implementation. I think my understanding of that is that you have a backend attribute associated with your current session, and if you go into like a pseudo.
So I have a credential for me, but something about my credential is not good enough for the action I want to take. So even though I'm David, I
have to
look at my contacts, but I can't send an email.
Right. Yeah, you have to re-authenticate, reassert your identity using probably your 2FA. And
yeah, but so the question then is, what's special about Cube? What makes Cube not need that? And I guess we're out of time, but that is, I like the simplicity of once I know you're you, but is that actually what I want?
Yeah, I don't have a strong answer there. I like Jordan's approach in the sense that it's more cautious and it gives us more choices in the future, because it's basically like we chose not.
I'm not saying we need to go for a whole thing now. I'm just saying that before excluding it forever, it's probably worth figuring out, like, do we believe that's forever a non-goal, an anti?
I would say more that I'm not sure right now.
Okay.
And so I would default to not propagating it to other layers.
Okay. Admitting lack of sureness is different than asserting non-goalness.
I can see ways that it would be used for evil, and I don't want to enable those things.
I would just like to clarify between a permanent never anti-goal and not yet, but maybe.
Okay. Jordan, do you mind writing your feelings to the? Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Rita, for keeping us on track.
Thank you. A lively discussion and rabbit holes. Yeah.
Don't you know about a SIG rabbit hole?
Yes. Hey, that should be our logo. I'm just kidding.
Bye all.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.